Ever heard of a general so brilliant, so terrifying, that for over a decade, the most powerful empire in the world lived in constant fear of his name? This isn't a myth. It's the story of Hannibal Barca, the Carthaginian commander from North Africa who brought Rome to its knees. Forget what you think you know from movies. The real story is far more epic. So, who is Hannibal, and why did he have such a burning desire to challenge Rome? To understand his fire, you have to understand his roots. Hannibal was born in Carthage, a powerful city-state located in modern-day Tunisia. The Carthaginians were a formidable force, a seafaring and trading empire that controlled vast territories across the Mediterranean. They were a proud people with deep African roots. Hannibal wasn't just some random general. He was the son of Hannibal Barca, a celebrated Carthaginian commander who had fought Rome in the First Punic War. Imagine being a young boy, maybe 9 years old. Your father, a national hero, is preparing to leave for a campaign. Before he goes, he takes you to a sacred temple and makes you swear an oath. Not a simple promise, but a solemn vow of eternal hatred towards your family's greatest enemy, Rome. This wasn't just a personal grudge, it was a legacy. Hamilcar had been defeated by the Romans, a humiliation that Carthage and the Barca family never forgot. Hannibal inherited this mission. It was his destiny to avenge his father and restore the glory of Carthage. The fight against Rome was in his blood. So, how did this one man become Rome's greatest nightmare? It started with one of the most audacious military maneuvers in all of history. After taking command of the Carthaginian army in Spain, Hannibal decided to do the unthinkable. Instead of a predictable sea invasion, he chose to march his armed tens of thousands of infantry, thousands of cavalry, and most famously, dozens of war elephants over the treacherous, snow-capped Alps. Think about that for a second. This was over 2,000 years ago. No modern gear, no weather forecasts, just sheer will and determination. The journey was brutal. His army faced freezing temperatures, avalanches, starvation, and attacks from hostile local tribes. By the time they descended into Italy, his forces were severely depleted. Many men and most of the elephants had perished. But the soldiers who survived were hardened, loyal, and ready for anything. Hannibal had forged an unbreakable bond with his men by sharing their hardships, sleeping on the ground alongside them, and leading from the front. Once in Italy, Hannibal's true genius shone. He wasn't just a brute. He was a master strategist, a psychologist who understood his enemies better than they understood themselves. He won 3 major, legendary victories that are still studied in military academies today. First, at the Battle of the Trebia, he lured the overconfident Roman consul into a trap. On a freezing cold morning, he sent his light cavalry to taunt the Romans, drawing them across a frigid river. While the main Roman force was cold, wet, and hungry, Hannibal's men were well-fed and waiting. He had hidden his best troops in the river banks, and at the perfect moment, they sprang the ambush, surrounding and crushing the Roman legions. It was a complete disaster for Rome. Next came the Battle of Lake Trasimene. Here, Hannibal used the landscape itself as a weapon. He marched his army along the northern shore of the lake, knowing the Romans were following close behind. The path was a narrow defile, with the lake on one side and steep, wooded hills on the other. Under the cover of a thick morning fog, Hannibal hid his entire army in the hills overlooking the path. As the long column of Roman soldiers marched blindly into the kill zone, Hannibal gave the signal. The Carthaginians charged down from the hills, trapping the Romans completely. They had nowhere to run. The battle turned into a slaughter, and another Roman army was annihilated. Rome was now in a state of pure panic. They appointed a dictator, Fabius Maximus, who came up with a new strategy: avoid a direct battle at all costs. Just shadow Hannibal's army, harass his supply lines, and wear him down. This earned him the nickname the Cunctator, or the Delayer. It was a smart strategy, but the Romans grew impatient. They wanted a decisive victory. They wanted to crush Hannibal once and for all. This impatience led to their greatest defeat, the Battle of Cannae. The Romans assembled the largest army they had ever fielded, nearly 80,000 men. They were confident that their sheer numbers would overwhelm Hannibal's smaller force. Hannibal, facing them on an open plain, did something that defied all military convention. He intentionally made the center of his battle line weak, placing his less reliable Gallic and Spanish infantry there. His best African troops, the veterans of his long campaign, he placed on the flanks, held back slightly. As the battle began, the massive Roman center pushed forward, easily breaking through Hannibal's weak middle. It looked like a Roman victory, but this was exactly what Hannibal had planned. As the Romans surged forward into the bulge, Hannibal's center slowly retreated, pulling the legions deeper and deeper into a U-shaped pocket. Then, he gave the order. His elite African infantry, positioned on the wings, swung inward, crashing into the exposed Roman flanks. At the same time, his superior cavalry, having already defeated their Roman counterparts, circled around and attacked the Roman rear. The trap was sprung. The massive Roman army was completely encircled. What followed was carnage on an unimaginable scale. By the end of the day, tens of thousands of Roman soldiers lay dead. Cannae is still considered the perfect tactical victory, a masterpiece of battlefield command. For the next decade, Hannibal and his army roamed freely across Italy. He never managed to take the city of Rome itself. He lacked the siege equipment and supply lines, but his presence was a constant terror. The phrase Hannibal ad portas, meaning Hannibal is at the gates, became a common expression used by Roman parents to scare their children into behaving. So, who could possibly stand up to a genius like Hannibal? Every great hero needs a worthy nemesis, and Hannibal's was Publius Cornelius Scipio. Scipio was a young Roman noble who had survived the horrors of Cannae. He studied Hannibal's tactics, learning from his enemy's brilliance. Instead of fighting Hannibal in Italy, Scipio did something bold. He took the war to Carthage, invading North Africa. This masterstroke forced the Carthaginian Senate to recall Hannibal from Italy to defend his homeland. After 15 long years, the bogeyman of Rome was finally gone. The final showdown took place on the plains of Zama, near Carthage. For the first time, Hannibal faced a general who was his equal in tactical skill, and who had a superior cavalry. Scipio used Hannibal's own tactics against him, creating lanes in his formation to channel the charge of Hannibal's remaining elephants, rendering them ineffective. The battle was hard fought, a clash of two of the greatest military minds in history. But in the end, Scipio's superior cavalry turned the tide, just as Hannibal's had done so many times before. They attacked Hannibal's army from the rear, and the great Carthaginian army was finally defeated. Even in defeat, Hannibal's story doesn't end. Exiled from his home, he spent years as a military advisor to other kings who opposed Rome's growing power. The Romans, however, never forgave him. They hunted him relentlessly across the known world. Finally, old and cornered by Roman agents in Bithynia, in modern-day Turkey, Hannibal refused to be captured. He had carried a vial of poison with him for years, prepared for this very moment. He chose to take his own life rather than become a trophy for his lifelong enemies. His last words were reportedly, "Let us relieve the Romans of their long-standing anxiety, since they cannot wait for the death of an old man." Hannibal Barca was more than just a warrior. He was a brilliant strategist, a charismatic leader, and a symbol of resistance against overwhelming power. He single-handedly terrorized the greatest empire of his time, and though he ultimately lost the war, his legacy as one of the most brilliant military commanders in history is eternal. His story reminds us that even against impossible odds, the courage and genius of one person can change the course of history. He was a black African warrior who also was whitewashed due to the Renaissance and racist political reasons. Thanks for watching. If you found this story as fascinating as I do, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the Smokies Niche channel, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next dive into history. See you next time, y'all bless.